Gotham Investigations, and I'm Jeff Giordano. You don't want to end up like Mark Sievers. You don't want to draw red flags. Are you looking to whack your spouse and have life insurance policies on them? Well, we're going to show you how. We're going to have a special guest on our show today, so stay tuned. You're going to get your answers. Gotham Investigations, I'm your private investigator, Jeffrey Giordano. This season, The Mitigation of Mark Sievers, we have a special book that we've been announcing that I wrote as part of being the mitigation specialist. This takes you on an in-depth journey through the mind of Mark Sievers. We have a special guest on our show today, Jeremy Nicholson, and he's going to teach us how to get life insurance policies on your spouse if you're going to whack at them.
Now, Jeff, that's not what I'm here for.
Okay. Well, Jeremy, just so you know, Jeremy is an expert on life insurance policies. We've used Jeremy on several cases. The attorneys have hired him to be an expert witness on certain matters. And Jeremy also acknowledged the book and had read the book, so he's kind of educated himself on the case itself. But Jeremy, in this particular incident, Mark Sievers, on some of the initial interviews with the police, he told him he had $2.5 million in life insurance policies. So what drew red flags is they found out there were actually about $4.5 million in life insurance policies, and he had 5 different policies on his wife.
Yeah, that's a red flag. I mean, that much insurance on a particular person, a spouse, that would cause a red flag in many cases. But I'm curious. I read the book, and it never really tells. Did they actually pay out on that?
No, they did not pay out on it because he was arrested and he was looked at and he was arrested. So that money went into a trust account where Teresa Sievers' sister is actually using that money until the kids turn 18. And I guess it helps with their housing, the schooling, the food. Now, ironically, the defense team, meaning the defense attorneys on the case and the law firm, they were counting on that money because they believed in his innocence from day one up until the very end. So believing in his innocence, they had to take out loans, I think $350,000 to $400,000 of loans, because literally a case of this magnitude kind of shuts down your law firm, as it kind of does even in our private investigation company when we do the mitigation. But luckily we have several resources and officers that are former law enforcement officers that are private investigators that step in and handle our cases and keep on running while we attack that. But no, they did not cash in on that policy. Not Mark Sievers, but they cashed in afterwards, yes.
Right. So, and my understanding was in the book, and I don't want to give it away, but Mark hired a hitman to do this job, and part of that scenario was he was going to get paid out. Did the hitman ever earn what he thought he was going to get?
No, he did not, and actually he was the one that turned around and snitched on Mark Sievers to reduce his sentence. So imagine you're the one that picks up a hammer, smashes someone's head in, and the other individual is just the individual that hires you, and he gets the death penalty, and he's in another state when the crime happens. So if somebody out there is going to whack their spouse or something like that, when is the proper time to get these policies in place, and should they get them through somebody else so they don't draw suspicion to themselves?
Number one, I would just say if you're planning to whack your spouse, I would not be talking about it. Number one, I would advise against it. Life insurance is really not intended for those.
Well, of course, they wouldn't be able to tell you what their mindset is. And if they did, I'm sure you would run and contact the proper authorities, because that's your legal morale and what you should do. I know you're a very
Absolutely.
honest person and stuff, but let's suppose that you don't know what's going on. What would be a way for them to hide these policies? Is there any way?
I mean, honestly, if somebody does not disclose, many of our policies are simplified issued policies, meaning there's no medical or any binding information that's required. Simply, they check the Medical Information Bureau, so everything goes into what we call a cloud. Kind of like if you think of a phone, it goes into a cloud server. All that information is saved anytime you go get a prescription drug or you have a diagnosis, even if you choose not to take a prescription. So I know many out there probably go out there and they go to the doctor, they want to listen to the doctor, and then they come home and they become their own doctor because they're like, I'm not taking that prescription. I don't know why they prescribed that for me. But what a lot of people don't understand is even though it was prescribed, as soon as it does get prescribed by a doctor, they actually are known for having that medication, even if they took it or not. So it stores there. When we go and actually ask for an application with any carrier, because I specialize in life insurance, and I work with multiple different carriers, right? So I work with the top 25 carriers in the nation. And what I do is I send that information out, and they're able to check the underwriting information that I provide. So I'll ask a series of questions, and so long as they didn't say, hey, I plan on killing my spouse, and everything looked normal in the interaction, there would be no red flags that would stop me from going ahead and writing that application. It would all be based on medical condition, prescription drug history, or age. So it's a pretty simple process. And of course, there's policies out there where we do full medical as well. It's required. But overall, it's a very simple process, easy, and we try and make it a very seamless process.
So it's important for our listeners to understand, and this happened to myself plenty of times too, going for physicals with the police. They send you to your private doctor. These doctors make money in the pharmaceutical industry. They actually get checks to prescribe medication and medicine or to change to a certain brand. So what happens is I've been prescribed for your heart, well, not for your heart, but for your cholesterol pills and medication. And the doctor insisted, no, don't worry, you don't have to take them if you don't want to, but I'm going to go ahead and give them to you, and you can throw them out when you get to your house. Well knowing that he could be screwing me over if I want to get a future life insurance policy, and that's something that I never knew, so I'm like, okay, just give them to me, other than saying take the pills and stick them up your behind.
Right, absolutely. I mean, that's a very common mistake. Many people, a doctor says, I'm going to prescribe them if you feel like you need them, and then you never feel like you need them. What you don't realize is it's on the information bureau. It is there, and when we check for insurance, if it doesn't match up with a question that you answered, it could decline you. That carrier could particularly decline you for coverage at that point.
So the network that you're referring to, who has access to that network? Would I, as an individual citizen, be able to call that network and find that information out, say, on an individual? Is that public record?
No. So everything's protected through the HIPAA, Health Information Privacy Protection Act, where we do not disclose information about any client, and that information cannot be shared with anybody else, other than when a signed application gives permission for that specific carrier to work with any doctors or nurses. So only an insurance company or a medical facility, medical doctor that you would see would be able to access that information. I will state that if there was something that came up in an application and you obviously were not aware of it, there is a dispute system that you can go out to, and you can actually dispute a medical information bureau. But if it was a prescribed antibiotic or a drug that's out there, not really antibiotics, but drugs that are out there, and you just chose not to take it, it's going to be there. They're going to have a record of it, and it's going to go against you when you do write an insurance policy.
So this HIPAA Protection Act that you're referring to, do policemen have access to this network? I mean, how would an officer, a homicide investigator, find out that Mark Sievers has these policies? Is there like a network to call? Oh, yeah, this individual has a policy through company A or company B?
No, actually, it's a very good point you bring up. Many people, they think about life insurance and what do I do with a life insurance policy? And many of the clients that I work with, the first thing I tell them is they want to have a printed out copy to have at home. Don't get an emailed copy. I mean, we're in the 21st century, but a lot of people have them emailed, and then they send in the email, and a family member will not remember or will not know. Of course, they're going to try and deep dive into an email, but if it's encrypted and they can't get in, they could have a life insurance policy that's there. Now, if they had knowledge that potentially they had an insurance policy was taken out, they could call individual companies and ask. They'll run social security numbers. Of course, they're going to have to prove who they are. So only the beneficiaries of the policy are going to be allowed to ask for that specific information. It's not just a police department or anybody that can go out there and get that information without that signed release from a client stating, I give this specific person the full authority to obtain the information at that point.
So a police officer getting this information, obviously the individual that he hired, his best friend to kill Teresa, it was his IT person as well. So he would definitely have access to
Absolutely.
look at these records and stuff like that. And he probably tipped off the police that, these policies are in place. And maybe they even went and confiscated his computers, which I think they did. And they probably went on there and they could probably see, all the information that's in there. But if not, is there a way to fish for these 5 different policies other than calling up each? I mean, there's got to be hundreds of companies out there.
Yeah, and I'm sure that the police department, FBI, or any other investigative services would have their own classifications or ways of getting information. But as far as just going out and looking, generically, if there's a way to track down, I mean, we were really not supposed to just go start looking for names or anything of that nature. We don't have a system to go plug in a name. There are ways of going out there. There are some systems out there that that many people have found that you can go in and plug information in, and you get basic information back. However, I will tell you, when you go into the whole grieving process and you have to bury somebody or something of that nature, a lot of times the mortician or wherever you're at, the mortuary, they will work with you and they will actually go out there and find the different types of policies. Now, that's not my job. So I can't tell you today that we could go out and just search for random policies from different people. I would not be able to do that, but I'm sure there are different ways. The best thing to know is just having that information readily available. So I always tell every client, make sure you have a printed copy, let your family know where it's at, because when the time comes, and we all know that that's the inevitable part of life, it's not a matter of if we're going to die, it's a matter of when we're going to die. Where is that folder at? What do they need to do to get that information and then be able to obtain that life insurance policy at that point?
Well, that's your theory, Jeremy.
Yeah, and I guess, Jeff, what I'm telling you is, in my body and our body today, we may come back from afterlife, absolutely, and we may live on forever. But today, I mean, we're all going to pass away. And the key is, do we have a policy that is just for death, or do we have something that have living benefits as well? So I work with different types of policies that provide cash value, that include many family members that we know personally, and it's affected me personally, that need long-term care. So I can help and put something in place for long-term care, and you don't have to worry about that. We do know the cost of anything medical. You already said it. The medical industry is just insane. The amount of money that's out there it's unbelievable. So if you're not protecting yourself, if you're not setting yourself up, that can be something that takes you under. It can be worse than the death alone, because all the bills and everything that pile up in the future is really it's a sad situation. But I work with multiple different companies: annuities, life protection, retirement planning. I can even help with some health planning as well. So before you get to the death aspect, let's go ahead and make sure that you have the health insurance in place. But ultimately, what I focus on and what I have my primary goal is life insurance for everybody. As a former EMT and firefighter, I do a full circle, and I come in here today and I say, I don't just help people when they're alive. I come in and I help people when they're trying to prepare for the we don't know when it's going to happen, right? So in it's unpredictable time frames, when is it going to happen? Just making sure you're in place for that.
And thank you for your service as a firefighter to the community as well. But if somebody wanted to contact you to talk about these policies, what would be a contact number for them to call?
They can call me directly. My cell phone number personally to get directly to me is 786-775-8888. Again, that's 786-775-8888. They can also email me at jeremynicholson@gmail.com. The Nicholson is not like Jack Nicholson. He's not my cousin or my uncle. He should be, Uncle Jack, right? So it's Nichhelson, Jeremy Nicholson at gmail.com.
Okay, fantastic. And you yourself, have you sold any policies where you're watching TV and saying, that guy just whacked his wife, or she just whacked his husband, and I sold a policy to them? Have you experienced that yourself?
Only in your book. No, I didn't sell Mark Sievers the policy, but no,
not Mark Sievers, but anyone else, because this happens on a daily basis. You got people, whacking their
I have not
spouses.
had the luxury of selling a life insurance policy to a specific movie star or any critic like that. I'd love to. So anybody watching this today, definitely reach out. I would love to help them out. I will tell you, it's not about selling a policy, it's about serving.
I think you missed the memo, Jeremy. Have you sold a policy to anyone that whacked their spouse?
Oh, no, I haven't been. Oh, are you crazy?
Well, I mean that not that you knew about, but you sell a policy to a lot of people, and then have you seen on the news and say, "Shit, I just sold a policy to them"?
No.
A year ago or 2 years ago.
No.
So what if you did? What would you do? Would you contact the authorities? Would you let it ride?
I'm bound to in the contracts, I'm bound to let the insurance companies know, but it's really not my job to do that. Once the insurance carrier writes everything, they have so many laws that are binding to them that they're going to go check. I mean, especially if somebody wrote a policy and in the first couple of years something happened, that's a red flag right off the bat. There's a contestable period even for life insurance period companies for 2 years. That if they go out there and they find that something was negligent or something happened, they're going to research, and it doesn't even matter, it could just be medical. They're going to look very deep to see if there's any issues or concerns that came up that were not disclosed in the application itself.
So that's another question too. Several cases we try to obtain a death certificate. Right. And they won't release them to myself, being even a private investigator. Normally we get it when it's in the discovery report and stuff like that. We get the autopsies and stuff like that. But they only release them, I think, to doctors, nurse practitioners, or a direct family member that they would have to show they're a direct family member, or an individual like, suppose a business or a company has life insurance policies on their individuals. You would have to show that policy and show that you're the turnkey for it and you have stake in this individual's death, and then they would release it to you. Is that correct? So that's not public record?
Yeah, absolutely. All of it is not public record. They would definitely, if they're listed as a beneficiary, it gives them the ability to go ask for a death certificate at that point. It's not something that's readily available. You cannot go to the Bureau of Vital Statistics and just ask for any random death certificate or birth certificate. Only a family member or somebody listed as a beneficiary or key holder in a business would be able to ask for that information because they have insurable interest at that point, and they would be able to request that death certificate at that point.
What age do you think it's important for people to start looking at policies? Young couples that are married, they're starting their life together. Of course, nobody's thinking about death at that time.
Right, and I'll go back to these policies have changed so much. If we went back 30, 40 years ago, it really was a death insurance, right? And many of these policies now are far more than just a death insurance. We need long-term care. We're all, we need to have them to make sure that we're protected and prepared for the future. So the average age, I tell you, 0. I mean, as soon as somebody is born, we should be thinking about what if something happens. I mean, Jeff, take a look around the entire world today and just put yourself out there and think, turn on the news for a minute and you hear about a car accident just happened down the street. You hear and 2 people were killed. You hear about a shooting that just took place in a school. So my question would go back and say, what would happen if that individual didn't come home, a child or a loved one didn't come home? What would that look like for you and your family today? And would you be prepared financially? You're already going to grieve. Anytime somebody passes away, you're going to grieve. But what would that financial assistance be? And would you rather wait until you're 60 or 70 when you're retiring and have to pay more? Because the cost of insurance goes up every single year for anybody. Or one medical prescription away. Everybody is just one medical prescription away from being non-insured, where they'd have to get a guaranteed issue policy that's limited in the amount they can get, doesn't cover them as well. So ultimately, Jeff, I would tell you the younger that you are, the better. Even before you're married, you should have a policy. You get married, you can always change the beneficiaries around. These are living, breathing documents. You can literally change them to be the best for you. And I just encourage people to really sit down, take the time to call me if they'd like a policy review or they'd like to know more. I'm happy to talk about it. If they're thinking just death and they're uncomfortable, we can talk about cash accumulation. We can talk about living benefits. We can talk about everything you can get out of it, far more than just the death. And then when death occurs, the family's going to be protected and taken care of.
So do you keep a copy of these policies yourself? I mean, what happens if somebody passes away and the family doesn't even know after 15, 20, 30 years that there's a life insurance policy in place? Does the life insurance company itself find out that this individual died, and do they seek the beneficiaries for it before they just close the policy and say it's unpayable?
Right. So that's a great question. The policy, so long as premiums are paid, it's always going to be in effect. If they find out that there is a policy that has not been paid and a premium is not being paid anymore, the policies do offer a lapse guard or a secondary person to be contacted. There are not insurance companies out there randomly looking for people who have passed away. In the insurance business, it is a business, and they're not looking to write that check as soon as somebody's passing away. Many of the companies I work with, we do take pride within 3 to 4 days. We have a check issued to the client once the death certificate's provided. But in many situations, if they're not notified, they would never know that person passed away. They're not getting alerted or out there consistently looking if this person passed away. But that notification of not receiving a payment, Jeff, would be a key to why isn't this happening. You would start seeing multiple notices going out. So having that secondary person listed or a secondary address listed on the policy is a good way to make sure you're covered. In that event, you don't have a lapse on the policy where the policy falls out, but also if something does happen, somebody's notified that there's a policy in place, and it's from there. So one thing I would tell you, it's kind of funny because I have clients that have told me, well, I don't want to tell my kids about this. I got a policy, I want to, but I want to tell my kids about this because they're going to think, man, I'm loaded and I'm going to, they're going to be golden.
Pop's
and
worth more dead than alive.
Yeah, and just read the book, and maybe the same thing happens.
Exactly. Yes.
So maybe another hitman goes out, tries to get hired. They see the policies in place, and so a lot of times they say, I don't want to say anything because I don't want them to go out and kill me today. And then all of a sudden they're going through the same thing, litigation, and trying to find out were these policies in place and so on and so forth.
So what about the instance where you have two brothers? Pops dies, and the brothers, they're both beneficiaries. One brother gets the bright light and says, I'm going to make him disappear. Let's go sailing, bro. Come on, tomorrow. Disappears. And then that person calls the insurance company, and they say, well, wait a second. There's two beneficiaries here. It's 50-50. Oh, I don't even know where my brother's at. Do they make a conscious effort into contacting the other beneficiaries on the policy in that particular case?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's where, having knowledge of life insurance and really understanding what's best for every client. And I'll tell you, every client is different. There's what we call primary beneficiaries, and there's secondary beneficiaries, also known as contingent. You can have multiple people listed as a primary. It just has to equal the 100% payout. If I was to have a policy and I go all my brothers and my sister on there and I say, no, I want that full policy, they're only going to give me my portion. And if one of them's missing, they're not going to say, oh, my brother's missing, pay Jeremy that portion. They're not going to do that. Every person has to provide documentation that they are the beneficiary with the death certificate and be able to have everything pushed through. A lot of times there can be a notary involved, that a quick, simple, this was notarized stating the person was present in front of them. Here's all the information, and they're able to get everything taken care of at that point.
Now, Mark Sievers, how much do you think he was paying for this $4.5 million policies? And he did have a couple on himself, I guess, just to, kind of let the smoke clear a little bit, saying, well, I had a policy too. I mean, for $4.5 million, 5 different policies, what kind of money are we looking at monthly?
It would depend on, again, I'm going to go back to what I said in the beginning, medical history.
She's healthy. She was healthy.
Okay. Yeah, so long as everything is pretty healthy, I mean, you'd probably be looking at a few $100s at least for those policies.
For each policy.
For each policy, yeah.
So probably $1,500 for a month. Or
It could even be less if they were younger. I mean, reading the book, they were not all that old.
Correct. Yeah.
So they would have gotten some really decent rates, and you can get some decent insurance, right? As long as you're healthy and you're doing it young, you can get some decent insurance rates out there. And if it was term, like a term policy where it does expire, and he knew he was going to knock his wife out, so I'm sure he didn't say, let me go out there and get a whole life policy. He wanted to put something in where it'd probably be 10, 15 years. He'd get the job done in that time frame and
it's
collect.
funny that you should mention the 2-year span, because he had it for, I think, 2 and 3 years, so he kind of let that out. But can they contest a murder? Like, well, we're going to wait till this is solved, or we want to. How long do they let like a murder go? Because some can go unsolved for years.
Yeah, and some of the insurance companies today have actually put clauses in there that if there was an intent to go out and murder, they would refund all of the premiums paid. So it wouldn't be that the insurance company actually gained from the policy, but they would not pay out that policy even past the 2 years if there was premeditative or if there was a murder or something of that nature involved. And again, they're going to dig deep, especially when it's that type of money. A couple million I think it was $4.4 million worth of policies. That's a lot of money. So insurance companies are going to really investigate and try and figure out what happened, where did it go. But really, Jeff, I mean, there are laws that are going to help the insurance company, but so long as you did everything properly and everything was put in place, I mean, likely that the insurance company is going to pay it out, just because it's going to look as though, from day one, the insurance company is going to start grieving.
We're calling this almost the perfect murder type of thing. Of course, that's a soundbite for the media and stuff. I look at it as the Three Stooges committing a murder, and we'll discuss that in further episodes. But so 2 years go by, 2.5 years go by, the murder occurs. Let's say he wasn't on their radar. Let's say because they didn't find the car, they didn't find the tracker that they had in there to show the mileage and everything else. How long can the insurance companies wait before they were able to give him the money? Like I said, it could be 2, 3, 4 years before a homicide is solved. Sometimes it could be indefinite.
Right, and I can tell you, they sometimes will hold off the 2, 3, 4 years to see what is actually said or what comes about. I mean, it really comes down to the investigative part and how it was brought, the attention that was brought to the
Can't the policyholder
insurance.
contest that and even sue and say, I want my money? Why are you looking at me? I'm the grieving husband, or I'm the grieving wife.
They could try, but again, murder is murder. And it was premeditative. It was set up, hired a hitman and everything.
Well, Jeremy, you're missing the question. They don't know he hired a hitman. He's not found guilty. He's not on the radar. When can he get his money? If he wasn't on the radar, they never found the car.
In normal situations,
come on, we're trying to help our bad guys out here. This is. I know you're trying to escape the question here, right. But we got a lot of sickos that like to watch our show too, and we have to kind of cater to them as well,
right?
Not
Absolutely.
just the good guys.
Yeah. So if they were really good about it, and in a perfect murder, and with many of the companies that I work with, like I said, we take pride in having payments made within 3 to 4 days. Okay. So it's very good possibility. They have the death certificate. They provide everything they're needing to provide.
Even though the death certificate says smashed in head with a hammer.
That's where I say it would cause some suspicion.
They're going to probably...
They could delay it a little bit.
Delay it.
Right, and look at full intent.
But how long could they delay that before, Mr. Sievers would get his cash?
I would say they would do some substantial investigations to rule out any type of foul play.
Foul play by the husband
Correct.
or by the wife.
Correct.
I mean, I think it's pretty equal around the country of wives whacking husbands versus husbands whacking their wife.
Absolutely.
And what policy do you recommend, Noah? Do you recommend the long-term, short-term policies, like for the average person, or is there different ages where you recommend different type of policies?
Yeah, really it is. Different ages for different people that ultimately are looking for coverage. There are plans that can accrue some really good cash value at a lower premium for children. Before I would just tell you everything would be whole life. Go out there and just do a whole life policy. You're going to pay the premiums it's intended to pay out. Some people want to roll the dice. Some people want to murder their spouses. So they may just do a term policy, right? Do it for a specific amount of time. That term is essentially for a specific amount of time. It can be from today for 5 years, 10 years, 15, 20, up to 30 years. Most term plans end in 30 years. But after that time frame, there would be no coverage in place. And if the person's still living, they may look at another policy at that point. But of course, older, they'd have to re-go through medical, all of that to get another policy. And then we have Index Universal Life, kind of the new policies that are they've been around for a long time, but it's getting a lot of activity on social media and TikTok videos, where they can go out there and they can get an Index Universal Life. It's going to have the living benefits. It's going to have the cash value. So it's essentially going to have a great death benefit, but you can use it as a living benefit overall, as well as the cash value. So almost like a retirement or a savings. So many benefits about that. And it's complex. I could talk for hours and hours and hours about that, Jeff. But the best way to do it is every individual is different. If they, anybody today that's looking for a life insurance policy, feel free to reach out. I'm 100% willing to speak to anybody. Whether you have a policy, whether you were declined. Jeff, people have told me all the time, I was declined by this insurance company, I gave up. And then they sit down with me, and by the end of the conversation, we have a policy in place with day one coverage that they never thought they could get. And that's just myself taking that extra step to find a policy, and I do that for every client that I sit with.
So when we mentioned that 2-year gap on the policy, so I happen to put down or lie, or not even lie, maybe I forget some things that I was prescribed or something, that can't be contested after 2 years?
Right. So typically, an insurance company only has what is called a contestable period of 2 years. They're going to do an in-depth. If they suspect something, they're going to ask for medical records. So many of our policies are simplified issued, as I said earlier. And what they're doing is they're checking that medical information bureau. If they find something there, they could go further and say, we found something, we'd like to go ahead and do a blood test, we'd like to take this further, just to rule anything out. But if they issue the policy, they have 2 years from that point in time that they can contest at any point in time and say, no, we need further testing or whatever. But I'm telling you, they rely heavily on the medical information bureau that's out there. They rely, everybody's logging in, putting that information in when you go to the hospital. If you apply for insurance, that insurance company is notating what they found. You go apply for another insurance, that insurance company is notating what they found. So they are basically able to read all the essential notes and then make the determination. But you get past that 2 years, they have a very difficult time in being able to contest what the actual policy is.
Gotham Investigations. If you're going to whack your spouse, make sure you get some good insurance on her or him, and make sure you get past that 2 years of the contestable time period, and at least have money in place for when you get caught and they stick you on death row, that your kids are going to end up with some money and be well taken care of. Stay tuned for our next episode. And if you like us, subscribe to our channel. Are you a fan of our show? Do you like our show? Then comment, hit the like button, and subscribe, or you might be the next one we investigate.